We're really excited that you're with us for this webinar, Pickups Meeting the Tethering Challenge. And again, our webinar today is brought to you by State Farm and Safe Kids, and we're really glad you're all with us today. So today we want to make sure again that you have a solid understanding of our objectives. So today there will be explaining of why tethering is so important, especially in pickup trucks, and highlighting the main approaches to tether anchor systems in pickup trucks so participants have some familiarity when they see them in the field. Also conveying basic hints and warnings by pickup tethering design categories. And lastly, providing helpful resources to technicians, including some guidance for utilizing the most important resource, the owner's manual. So we are so excited to have on the call with us today Denise Donaldson, and some of you are very familiar with Denise, who is the owner and editor-in-chief of Safe Ride News. Her publications include Safe Ride News newsletter, the Latch Manual, which so exciting that the new one is out, and the School Bus Safety Handbook. Denise also runs a local CPS program throughout the Seattle area hospitals, which she founded in 1996. She's been a CPST instructor since 1998. And Denise also currently serves on the CPS board, but is not representing the board during this presentation today. So Denise, we are so happy that you're with us today. And with that, I'm going to hand it on over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today. And if you know me at all, you know I love promoting the use of tethers with child restraints. So this is a great opportunity to talk about pickup trucks in that respect. This cover page might look a little bit familiar to you if you sat in on my last presentation on this topic. I did one a few years ago that was generally about child passenger safety in pickup trucks. And that I thought went really well. I got a lot of good feedback, but the one critique I got was, boy, we need more information specifically about tethering. So while that presentation took us up to tethering and did a kind of a cursory review of tethering, this presentation goes builds on that and goes much, much deeper. So you might see a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, I'm really adding to and building on that information so we can learn a lot more about tethering in pickup trucks specifically. But speaking generally, of course, to a group of CPSTs, we all are pretty familiar with the fact that tethering is beneficial. I don't have to convince you of that. You can see it has to do with head excursion, how far forward the head actually will go when a child seat is tethered versus when it's not. And we know that our number that we can refer to is that it can limit that head excursion or reduce how far the head goes forward by up to 4 to 6 inches, which is very helpful and very important to reducing the likelihood of serious injury. But I want to talk just a little bit more about that 4 to 6 inches. For one thing, why is there a range? Well, that amount of limiting of head excursion can vary depending on a lot of different factors. And so just a few would be that the child restraint design itself, and also the vehicle characteristics, how the seats and the belts are designed. Also that where the tether anchor is located, how far back from the seat, those kinds of considerations, as well as the height and weight of the actual child that's in the seat. And of course, whether the seat has been installed properly and the harness has been used properly. So all those factors go into how much the tether is going to be helpful. I also was considering recently the fact that the studies that established that efficacy of tethering were done back in the 90s. And if you were a technician in the 90s or a parent in the 90s, you probably noticed that both cars and car seats have changed dramatically, and many improvements have occurred over that period of time. So I asked some engineers, both at universities as well as at car seat manufacturers, who regularly test car seats used with the tether and without, to see if that 4 to 6 inches remains a pretty good estimate of how much the tether can help. And I just wanted to report back that what I learned was that yes, 4 to 6 inches is still reasonable, and if anything, it may be conservative. So we're not overstating the effectiveness of a tether by saying 4 to 6 inches. Also, the benefits of tethering are going to increase with the child size. So we know over that period of time, we actually have a lot more high weight harness systems that are going to hold children above the norm back in the 90s of 40 pounds. And those benefits to tethering will increase with those larger children. And as we know, tethering can really help compensate for other types of misuse. And while our 4 to 6 inches is measured in a frontal crash, there are also benefits to tethering and side impacts. So in other words, tethering is very important, and I would assert that it's just as important, or maybe even more so, in a pickup truck, mainly because in pickup trucks, we have less space in front of the child in a lot of those pickup trucks to afford any head excursion. So we're really going to want to hold the child back so that they're not being thrown forward and striking the seat in front. When it comes to pickup trucks, I have to start by reiterating from the last presentation how important it is for us to first establish what type of pickup truck cab we're using, because that's what really matters. We do, of course, need to know the model name, but each model name might come in different types of cab styles. So the 3 basic cab styles you need to know about are a regular cab that doesn't have a back seat at all. Then there's extended cabs that have a little more room behind the front seats, and most of the time they're going to allow some room for a limited back seat in those, or maybe even side-facing seats. And then finally, crew cabs, which are pretty much a full ample back seat like in any other vehicle would have. So clearly it makes a big difference on how we're using car seats in these trucks when you have a nice big back seat versus a modified smaller back seat, or even no back seat at all. I wanted to point out too that in the latch manual, we really have been trying every edition to make it clearer and clearer, because this can get really complicated and confusing when you're working with pickup trucks. And I always have to remind myself to say thank you to Katrina, because it can't be said often enough. If you know the incomparable Katrina Rose, she is our vehicle manufacturer liaison for the latch manual. And many editions ago, she noted that the information we were getting on pickup trucks for the latch manual from the manufacturers wasn't necessarily breaking out by cab style, which is, of course, very important, as we say, information for us in the latch manual. So she went about making sure over time that we've made a lot more improvements so that it's broken out the way it needs to. I think we've really come up with a pretty solid representation of pickup trucks. This last time, what I've wanted to add is shown in the little red arrow. I wanted each of the pickup trucks to say whether it's an extended cab, how many doors there are, with all the virtual checkups we've been doing, and maybe we don't even see the truck in person. I wanted to be able to say what that backseat environment's like. Do you have rear seats? Are there, how many doors, and if there are access doors? And you can see, like here, this is a F-150 super cab. And it's like, well, Denise, you said they were going to be regular cab, extended cab, or crew cab, but they actually come up with their own marketing terms. So for the F-150, an extended cab might be called a super cab. And so this kind of tells us, instead of having to memorize it, you know, if it's a Nissan, it might be a king cab is an extended cab, or if it's a Dodge, it's a quad cab. I can't memorize all those things. I can check here to see which type of cab I'm actually working with. And the other thing I wanted to note is that when we added all this extra detail under the model style section, this, you know, I had a lot of space here that was available to put that information, but I didn't always have a lot of space. And when I add a lot of more information here, I risk bumping the pages out. And one of the things I'm really careful about is not making the latch manual end up being 800 pages long or something. So when there isn't enough space here to add that information and you went, what does this mean? Look over here for model clarification. And in a more space effective way, we added that same information, but that's why it's over in the notes. So I wanted to explain that that's new for the 2021 manual, that this is really consistently provided for all the trucks. Okay, and so as I just pointed out, not every Ford F-150 is a super cab. You know, they're all different types. And that's true for virtually, not all, but nearly all truck models are going to have different kind of cab styles. And the important thing to note is that the manual that they prepare that comes with the vehicle is not going to be, and the one online for that matter, is not going to be broken out by cab style into different manuals. It's all within the same. So it's broken out within that manual, but you need to make sure that you're looking at the right information for the truck you're actually looking at. So say you've already determined that you're in a crew cab. Well, in this Toyota Tacoma, access cab is what they call their biggest model. And so this is going to be the picture. And we'll look at this actually in a picture later on in the detailed section as we go along. But the main thing I want to point out is you can see within that same manual, you can see double cab models, which looks very different in its tethering, and even what they call access cab without rear seats, which is their regular cab, where you're able to tether in the front seat, but back to what was the router in the back seat. So in the same model, same manual, you're going to see all three of those different kinds of descriptions. So it's extremely important when you're working with these manuals that you're really carefully checking the correct segment for the type of cab style that you're using. And so speaking of, the ability to tether in the front seat, I talk about this a lot in the prior presentation, but it bears repeating. There are times when in pickup trucks, we have to use the front seat. For instance, if the back seat isn't existing, like in that Tacoma, but also if there are side-facing seats or the seats are just too small to fit a car seat, then there's going to be those times when we really have to put the child in the front seat if the child must ride in that truck. So we want to make sure we're really careful about how to use them. So just briefly in this presentation, I'll reiterate that you want to make sure you've checked the owner's manual carefully. You want to make sure that any airbag is turned off, either using a turn off key or that it is sensing it. So you're checking the dashboard for the indicator so that you can see that it actually has been turned off. You're also going to want to take that front seat and roll it back as far from the dash as possible so that it's really far back, almost like a back seat. But then finally, use the tether when forward facing whenever possible. And I think that is something that people sometimes forget is an option when you're in the front seat. That they've usually, especially in these vehicles that are prior to that any of these vehicles that have been made since latch, there's going to be a way to do that tethering from the front seat. And even before latch was in place, there were many options in front seats of vehicles to actually, in pickup trucks, to actually tether to a seat that's in the front seat to a seat belt in the rear seat. And I think this is something that used to be a fairly well-known and common thing that we don't necessarily know much about anymore. But I want to bring it up when we talk about pickup trucks, because having just reviewed all the models in the latch manual, every time I'm really struck by how many times for how many pickup trucks that is actually the advice for how to tether in the front seat. And I apologize that these pictures are actually drawings from a school bus, which is another environment where we do this, but it gives you the idea that the idea is that you're going to take the tether and you're going to attach it either to a hole in the latch plate or to the belt webbing, depending on what the description is. And so I don't have a lot of time to discuss this a lot more, but I want you to know that this is a concept that's actually stated in many owner's manuals, also in the latch manual. And so you can generally learn more about it on pages 47 and 48 in the latch manual. And if you're wanting to look at a specific example, and there are a lot of them actually, but I just put this one, the Ford F-150 model year 92, 96, is just one example of where that's stated. And then one last thing to note though, is that I asked all the car seat manufacturers whether it's allowed to attach when that's the description in the owner's manual. Most of them said, yeah, if that's in the manual, it's okay. But some of them said no. So that's going to be in Appendix A of the latch manual. So just be aware that that is another thing to consider. So let's get back to the basic question about tethering though in pickup trucks. And that is, why are those tether anchors so weird? And I'm not going to go through these examples, but you can just kind of scan those that you can see. These are not your typical direct, easy tethers that we might see in other kinds of vehicles. So why are tether anchors in trucks kind of weird to us? And first of all, a reminder that FMVSS 225 covers only vehicles up to 8,500 pounds gross vehicle weight. So you may actually find some pickup trucks, the very largest ones, not the base level ones, but when you get to the much larger level ones, some of them do weigh more than the requirement. So they aren't required to actually have latch features, although some voluntarily do comply. So you may find some trucks where you don't even find, even newer trucks where you don't find tether anchors. But the front seats of some trucks might not have lower anchors, but they still must have the tether anchors if they're under the 8,500 pounds. So you just have to look for, in the owner's manual, if you want to check the weight of a vehicle, you probably know you open the driver door and look for the sticker that's alongside the door panel, and it's going to tell you the gross vehicle weight rating, and if it's over whatever it is, but you can tell then if it's over 8,500 pounds. And if you're interested in these kinds of loopholes, they are provided in the latch manual, so you can go read more about them as a summary. But for when we do have to have tether anchors in vehicles, it's the question still remains, why are they so strange in pickup trucks? And I like to start by pointing out that in FMVSS 213 that covers car seats, there is actually a tether hook design standard. So safety standards generally aren't design standards. They're usually performance standards. But in this case, they did make a design standard for the hook itself. So this is the overall tether, right? But this part isn't really design standard, but the hook itself is going to look just about like this with only very little variation time and time again. And with that in design as a standard, then they allow the vehicle manufacturers to design however they want the tether anchor design that works for their pickup truck, or any of their vehicles. So the design of the tether anchor itself isn't standardized, other than it has to have a performance standard. It has to accept that standardized hook, and it needs to meet the strength requirements that are in the standard, and it needs to be located in a specified zone. And so this picture is the allowed zone. All the gray area is the allowed zone where the vehicle manufacturers can locate a tether anchor. And so it gives them, and of course this is two-dimensional, so this is only the up and down, but this goes across the back of the back seat. And within this zone, they have the ability to place in a strong enough location based on the vehicle's design, whatever kind of anchor they can come up with that's strong enough to hold the hook that's been standard design. So you can see that right behind the head, there's a white area where you can't place it, but within this zone, you can place it. But the problem is in a pickup truck, of course, much of that gray area is blocked off. It isn't existing because we have that back panel in place. So those designers of trucks have to come up with a solution that's going to work within the gray area, but that in a very, very limited area. And so what that leads to is that we have two general types of tether anchor systems. One would be called a direct system, and one's called a router system. And if you looked at the 2020 CPST curriculum that came out almost a year ago now, the cool thing is that we now, pickup trucks are no longer part of other vehicles, but the tethering part of it has been brought into the general latch section of that curriculum. So that's great. That means, and now they're actually describing it so that new technicians are trained so they understand that trucks might have these kind of either direct or router systems. So let's first talk about what direct systems are. So a direct system is one that's going to go take the tether straight from the car seat to the tether anchor that's somewhere behind the seat. And that might be on the wall or the seat or the floor. And in this picture, you're like, what am I looking at here? So in this picture, this is the seat back here, and the seat, or the panel back here, I mean, and the seat cushion back has been folded forward. So you can see these three loops. This is where you would hook the tether to, but the seat has to be folded forward to access those because the seat back is so flush when it's upright to the back panel that you can't get the tether hooked down to it. So in other words, in these vehicles with a direct system, direct might sound really straightforward, but it isn't always quite as straightforward as it might seem because you really have to move the seat forward to access those. So here you can see, even in this vehicle that says this is from an owner's manual, it says this is in their crew cab, which should be a big vehicle. Nonetheless, you have to fold the seat back forward to actually get to the tether anchor. And shown in a more realistic scenario here in a picture, you can see that, oh yeah, and by the way, the anchor, the tether itself is attached to a car seat, right? So where does that car seat go? So we see the person here who perhaps with their right hand is stabilizing the car seat as it kind of balances in the footwell while they hook this on. A little bit of an awkward situation, but doable. You got to know what you're doing and make sure you route the tether properly with respect to the head restraint through the posts in this case, and hook it on. And then, though we would prefer to have the car seat already on the seat cushion and in fact probably installed, clearly that's not going to be possible here before we actually hook the tether. We have to get the tether hooked and then place the seat back up so that the car seat can be installed. So as tricky as that is, it can get a little bit trickier in some cases with these direct systems. And here's just one example with a Chevy Avalanche crew cab. These pictures are from 2012, but it would apply in a range of times. And the Avalanche is the same as a Cadillac Escalade EXT. So it looks like this type of a truck. And here is an example, we do have to fold the seat back forward, but we can't do that until we can't flip this seat forward because this hinge won't work until this seat cushion itself is out of the way. And so you have to take a little loop up here and release the seat cushion first as step one, and then you take the seat back forward in order to get to the tether anchors, which are circled here. Just so you know, then in the latch manual, here's the Avalanche entry for the latch manual, and it does say that what I just described here is given for the 3 tether anchors are near the floor on the rear seat leg, and it tells how to hook to it. And I added, don't have a router, because a lot of times in trucks we assume there's a router, but of course there isn't always. And you want to fold the seat cushion forward, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing I wanted to point out is that you can find tether anchor photos at saferidenews.com in the latch gallery. And if you've seen my presentations before, I do note the latch gallery pretty often. So I hope a lot of people know about it. But this is a free to anyone to look at resource on the Safe Ride News website. This is what it looks like on your phone if you do the drop-down menu, or on your laptop or computer or tablet. But basically under latch, you're going to find latch gallery, and then you can view tether anchors or lower anchors. And it gives us an opportunity to show you a little bit more detail than we can show in the latch manual, and give a little more of a clear picture of how to do some of these especially weird things, right? And please notice too, by the way, that there's a button here for submitting an image, because this is something that we hope is interactive. If you find things that Katrina and I haven't found in the field ourselves and have something you want to share, please take pictures, and you can submit it back by filling out this submission form, and we will post it. And we do have several. Thank you to any of you who have already sent those. We do have some of those in there that are posted. And in here, this gives another example. This is the Avalanche is one that's in this latch gallery. And so now we've got the seat folded forward, but though I have some circled areas here where tether anchors ought to be, if you look closer at it, you can see there are some confusing kind of things here that could be decoys or mistaken for a tether anchor location. If you look, you can see, and if you get the light just right, of course, in this picture, it's pretty good. You can see that there is actually an embossed image that the tether anchor should be somewhere nearby, but it's not on this panel, it's just near here. So it's still not entirely clear. And if you look at the owner's manual, this is what it shows for helping you find the tether anchors themselves. And I'd credit them in a picture in an owner's manual. This does give us the words. It tells us where they are located on the back of the rear seat frame above the floor. And helpfully it does call out in these little insets the shape. It's kind of this rounded at the bottom shape. And so that could help getting in here and taking a look and finding what we're looking for. But it's still, remember, we're in kind of a cramped and possibly dark situation. And so what the latch gallery and what I want to help show is that the location is really supposed to be back here, which isn't actually as easy to see when you're looking from the side, and it hooks on in this way. And so this is the right way for it to hook on. Okay, so that's just one example of one truck with a direct routing system, and there are several different ones. At the auto shows, I like to take a tether strap with me and test some of these out. And so in real life situations and in those situations, I've come up with a few little general warnings. First, I want to make sure that people know that they're using the actual tether anchor. We just kind of explained that, and you could see some examples of where the mistake in tether anchor might be used. In this picture, I think underneath where these arrows are, you'd actually in the real truck see a little embossed tether anchor. So I think it would usually be pretty clear that this is the tether anchor, but there is this hook here, which is what, of course, the seat back hooks into. So it would be a mistake to use that, but you could see where someone could do that. So just always be sure. There's always chances that people don't, and labels for tethers are not a requirement in the standard. So while we do have many, we don't always have them. So we really want to be careful about that. We also want to be sure that the seat back relocks. This was something I was really careful in this latch manual to be sure we mention. Anytime we talk about folding a seat back forward, we got to be sure that when we put it back up, it's actually clicking locked. And this is especially a problem in pickup trucks because, and I've definitely noticed this in real life, especially when we have a bulky adjuster on the tether itself, sometimes it can get between the seat back and the back panel, and it's tight enough that the little hook doesn't hook into the locking mechanism for the seat back, and it prevents it. So in a lot of cases, and certainly you can see it in this picture, there's a little inset above the anchor, and I'm fairly sure that is to help with having a place for the adjuster to go, and certainly it does help for that. So just be aware that you want to line it up, that it stays in that place, and make sure that you've solidly clicked the seat shut. And you also want to be sure when you do that you don't trap any of the tether straps slack behind the seat, because if it's still slack and it's back there, these are pinched closed enough in some cases that you won't be able to know for sure you've pulled all the slack out when you go to tighten the tether after you get the car seat installed. And in fact, in some cases, depending on the design, you may need to actually pre-tighten the tether strap, then close the seat and do kind of backwards from what we usually do, then install the car seat. But clearly when you do that, you need to be careful that the car seat is still seated down, touching the seat cushion. The car seat's not being pulled up by a too tight pre-tightened tethering strap. Okay, so for the last part of this, we'll talk about router system tethering systems, which is arguably even more complex. And so a lot of things to kind of think about. And in these router systems, this is showing a picture of one, by the way, but generally speaking, it doesn't have to look just like this. Well, this is one type, but it's generally where the tether first goes through a router that's behind the seat, and then it makes a turn, which could be parallel or angular, but then attaches to a tether anchor of some type. And this can be found in both smaller and very large pickup trucks. So all types might have this. The routers themselves can have many designs, and so you see materials that really vary. It could be made out of a flexible webbing loop that could be wide or skinny. We're going to see some in pictures coming up that are skinny. This is kind of a wider one. There are many that have rubber-coated wire loops, like up in the top left here, and sometimes it's just a wire, which can either be open, like shown here, or a few are actually closed. And not all routers also serve as a tether, but many of them also do, like in a dual loop system we'll talk about next. And I do like to point out that some webbing loops have a metal ring on the inside that serves as the tether anchor. So this is an example of one that actually has a ring that's attached to some webbing, but it's inside the router loop. Now, one of the issues we have with these router systems is sometimes they lead to some incompatibility with car seats, especially because the loop styles, when they're closed, they can't be enlarged. And when that matches up with an adjuster hardware on a car seat that's the bigger type, sometimes they don't slide through like they should, or like you'd want them to. So that's a mismatch. And I will say that being a determined person, and many CPSTs are pretty, you know, they're going to be fairly determined, especially when we're so convinced that tethering, we want to do it. I have found myself in a situation where I'm really squeezing it and trying to get it to go through that loop. And I just want to caution people that if you're finding it really hard to get it to go through, then it's probably going to be even harder to come back out later. And you could leave a family with a situation where they think they need to cut the tether to get the car seat out of the truck. So I would really caution you from being overly aggressive. Certainly try to see if it slips through easily enough. But if you're really taking superhuman efforts, I would say that we need to back up. Luckily, we do have a fix or a little hack that we can safely do that is allowed by the manufacturer of the car seat, if the manufacturer of the car seat has a tether extender. So, a lot of times the adjuster that particularly even flow seats have, like you can see here, the red adjuster on their newer ones, it's a little bit smaller than some of their older ones, but it's still a little bigger than a regular tilt lock type. And Evenflow does have a tether extender with an adjuster on it. So we can actually do this kind of a fix. So starting with just taking the tether and fully shortening it on the car seat so that you haven't lengthened it at all, so that when you set the car seat back up against the seat, so this is the car seat, it's in place on the seat, and this is the hook just kind of barely peeking up above the seat, and here's just the head restraint for placement so you can kind of get your bearings, but that just puts the anchor right up against the seat. And then the fix would be to take that tether extender. So it looks like this, where it has the hook on one end, of course, the adjuster, and then a small little piece that attaches to the car seat's hook. And you go ahead and hook that end to the actual tether anchor. And then that way you can slip this end, you can run this end through the loop and attach it to this car seat's tether hook. This little part is small enough to go through the loop, and this part never has to go through the loop because it's on the other side already. And so that can be your fix by using a tether extender. So it's called an extender. Its initial purpose is to make it longer. In this case, we aren't actually doing that. We're just using it as a way to bridge between a too small space. And then, of course, in the end, you don't tighten on the car seat, but on the tether extender itself to get it nice and snug. I should also mention that this description is in the latch gallery. So if you're kind of scratching your head on this one at all, please go check that out. It's a 2-page sheet in the latch gallery that kind of walks you through the steps. So as I mentioned, one of the more common type of routing system is what we call a double loop design, or I call a double loop design. And in this kind of design, it's one of the most challenging for people to work with. It's kind of odd looking, and it's not always necessarily so hard to do. It just takes a lot of extra effort and extra steps. And in fact, in an Insurance Institute for Highway Safety study in 2014, they found that type of system was definitely the most confusing for caregivers. And in fact, only 11% in the study used that type right, compared to 57% for all other types. So I'd say 57% was a little bit disappointingly low for all other types, and 11% proper use is extremely low and disappointing. So definitely we need to make sure that we're helping families who have this type so that they understand the proper use. So I'll talk a little more about that. First thing to note is in this picture, just to clarify, this is demonstrating 2 different car seats. So that's not necessarily clear without explanation, so I apologize. So pretend we're looking through the back window of the car, and there's a car seat in 2 outboard positions, and they each have their tethers routing through the router behind and then attaching to the loop that's in the center. So the first thing that should come to people's mind is that, wow, in the end, we're actually tethering 2 seats to the same tether. And in the case of pickup trucks, this is one of those kind of unusual trivia questions as to when is it okay to hook 2 car seats to the same tether anchor. And this is it, when you're in a pickup truck and they say it's okay to do so. Now, in not every owner's manual is it entirely clarified, like actually specified that it's okay to tether both to the same center one. And so we've made sure that if this is the type of system in the vehicle, in a pickup truck, and it's okay, we say that in the latch manual. So in the notes section for that truck, you will find that actually stated, so you can be comfortable knowing that both children in outboard positions can actually safely attach to that center tether anchor. And I also, when I use this drawing that we drew long ago, I inherited, I also like to point out it's showing the routing only, because these are, again, these are webbing loops, these routers, they're not hard metal. And so as you tighten this strap, and as you tighten this strap, what you want to see is that these two flexible loops would ultimately start to point inward a little bit as this strap starts to straighten out from the tightening. And so you can actually help it move that way and help it slide through, just like you would any other webbing that we know we have to help slack move. You're going to be wanting to do that to tighten up the installation as much as possible. With these systems, it can also be, even in a big truck, this is in quad and crew cabs for Ram, here's your loop back here, and it's right up against the back window and the head restraint. In this picture, Katrina's showing that if we found that if you raise the seat cushion, and notice this cushion raises from the front edge, but if you raise that seat cushion, it ever so slightly moves the back seat forward a bit, which gives you just enough additional hand space to work better back there. So that's something to consider. And also from the owner's manual for this particular truck, it actually specifies that helpfully they did allow one adjustment position for the head restraint, specifically for doing the tethering in that vehicle. Here is a Toyota Tundra double cab. So that's their extended cab pickup, in which we have a couple technicians working very hard to get a double loop system, or actually a router system, to work. Please note that they opened that full back window, which is so helpful because Chris's head's able to actually come out the back and get behind that head restraint to do the work. And you could even consider climbing up into the back of this cab if it helps. But notice in this one, it's not actually, even though there's a router for the car seat that would be on this seat here, in this truck, the idea is you go through the router behind and you then attach to this little metal bracket that is in front of it. So in the double cab for this year period, you want to attach it to the bracket itself, not the loop. Whereas in the Toyota Tundra Crew Cab, you might have it, and especially in this, showing examples from this period of time, you have a different situation. The metal bracket is not the loop, the tether anchor. You want to go through the flexible loop and go and attach to the other one. And I'm sorry these pictures aren't more clear, but I hope you've seen these by now because they've been around since 2014. But Toyota did a really cool thing, and they added very clear yellow labels to show that this is actually for a car seat. You can see a car seat here, and it's going over to the other anchor, and you have an image of a tether anchor. Because how many times do people see those wire covered, rubber covered wires, or the loops, and pull on them like it's going to change the seat or something, when they have no idea what it's really for? But this is making it very clear that it's for tethering. You do have to be careful though. Again, if you're used to the Toyota Tundra, a crew cab isn't the same as a double cab. You got to be sure you're following the instructions for the right one. And so again, you're not attaching to that metal hook as the tether anchor. And you also want to be sure that the what this one's trying to show is that the loop is on the outside of the metal bracket. It shouldn't be threaded underneath it. I also want to mention, and I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, so just be aware this is all in the latch gallery, but the Ford F-Series pickup trucks in the Super and Crew Cab styles have rather new information since 2015. This is an excerpt from 2019 manual, but it's been since 2015, that says to route the vehicle tether loop between the head restraint posts and then route the child restraint tether strap through the loop. And then it further says down below, the head restraint support post holds the child restraint tightly, but the head restraint post is not strong enough to hold the child restraint during a crash. So when we brought this up to Ford, because normally you'd put the tether itself through the posts and the router would be behind the head restraint. But in this particular vehicle, in these models, in these particular years, Ford is saying to actually bring the loop forward and then go through. And so we have several different iterations of multiple car seats in the truck, one car seat in the truck, which seat you're in. So you can just find which type of situation you have to try and track down the right routing and how you do that, because it actually makes a difference if you're putting adjacent car seats together. And this can get, I apologize, a little bit confusing. Back when we figured that out, we had already issued the latch manual and Ford had not given us that information. So we had to issue an update for the 2019 manual. And I only mention that now just as an opportunity to say, in the future, always check to see if there are updates to the latch manual, which we post for free at our website. So be sure you check that. Luckily for the 2021, we were able to put all this information in the latch manual now, of course, so that it's specifying the difference between if it's a model year 15 or newer or older, because for the older ones, you do go through the head restraint posts. And also, like I said, that can get a little bit confusing. Also, please note that in the bullets, these are the bullets that are ahead of Ford in the latch manual in Appendix B. Just be aware that Ford does generally allow adjustable head restraints to be moved upward, and if removable, removed and securely stowed. So if you're having trouble with how I'm going to route this tether around this head restraint, this is a really good place to go look. You check the bullet to see if there's general guidance there about allowing the head restraint to come off. And then if you go check the model specific notes to make sure there's no specific information about that vehicle that is different, then maybe the easiest thing to do is simply remove the head restraint for the time being and make sure it's stowed safely. So also noting, if you go back to here, we have the general information tethering in certain Ford pickups that's given here. If you go to the actual pickup itself, this F-150 says that there are 3 tether anchors and C tethering in certain Ford pickups, bullet above. So this is a way for us not to have to write out a lot of text in a whole bunch of different model notes. Instead, we're saying go back to that bullet and this car applies to that bullet. Also, please note that in those model year 2015 or those model year pickups, there were certain model years, model year 15 and 16, it didn't actually say this information, though they said it does apply. So if you see an owner's manual that doesn't have this advice in it, but it says to pull the strap forward in the latch manual, this is just clarifying that this is updated information. It's updating anything in the owner's manual. Okay, so the last part of this presentation, I just want to point out, we're really used to this parallel system where we kind of go over and attach to the other router, but there are actually angular systems too, and those can be some of the most kind of complex ones. So I do want to point out a few of those. When you have these kind of angular ones, often you have an open wire, so you don't have to worry about it fitting through an opening. You just slide the strap through it. But then you have to go, where do I go from there? So in some cases, like for instance, in the Honda Ridgeline, which is all crew cab vehicles, you go from that router and then you route down alongside this car seat and you hook it to a tether anchor that's down here on the floor, right kind of by the door frame. And you have a nice label right next to it, which you can see right there, pretty well labeled. It's not always super well labeled. This is in a Toyota Tundra, an older one, and I don't know, it could have been also the same in the Ridgeline. This is just a picture I happen to have. But because Tether anchors are not required to be labeled, you will find some that aren't nearly as clearly labeled. So in this truck, you do the similar kind of thing where you go through a router and then come down to the side on the floor. And you'd have to know really what you're looking for to know that that's a Tether anchor. In the Ridgeline example, the center seat also has a Tether anchor, of course, and that's even more challenging, right? Because we don't have the side of the seat to go to. So in this case, and I loved getting this truck that had these parts in white because it really made it easy for me to show in a photograph that while these are the lower anchors here, the tether strap is going to go through the router, which is going to look just like this, and then it's going to run down between the back of the car seat and the front of the seat cushion. So super unusual, right? We usually go behind the seat. This is in front of the seat cushion and then hooked to that tether anchor. Okay. In Nissan Frontier King Cabs, which again is their extended cabs, we have some model years that have jump seats. And so we do have to consider some situations where the seat's going to fold out and we actually fold out a little tray that extends the seat cushion. So the owner's manual describes if you're installing a car seat, you're going to open up this extra part so you can hold the car seat on there. And then the tether's going to go through that router, which looks like that, and then down to an anchor that's near the seat belt. And in the Toyota Tacoma, which this is a picture of what I'd showed you earlier real briefly from the owner's manual, the router goes through, it's not an open wire, it's actually a closed wire router. And then the tether strap goes down. This is actually a mistake. It should not go to this one, but you could see where that could happen. It actually should go to the one closer to it. So the latch manual tries to clarify that. And then I'm going to conclude these specific examples talking about one I think that is probably one of the most challenging or most unusual, and that's the Toyota Tundra from many years. They're in their access cab, which is an extended cab between 2000 and 2006. And these are pages from the latch gallery. You're going to find that the owner's manual looks like this. The tether anchor is inside a little flap that's inside the fold down armrest. And so that's a pretty clear example of what's shown here, right? You flip down the armrest, there's a nice little label on this one here, and when you lift it up you can see what we can recognize as a tether anchor inside. The little more challenging part of this, and that's so unusual, is that the router is actually, you route it by going through the slot in the seat cushion itself. So you have to kind of fish it down through this little slit in the seat and get the strap to dangle down and then hook it on. And so inside the seat cushion, naturally, there's a bunch of foam, cushiony stuff. And so it's not an open channel that you can just drop it down easily. You kind of have to help it move down with your hand. And I've actually found it really helpful to attach a zip tie temporarily to the hook, and then have that be the lead. So you push that down with the zip tie first. And so down here, this is that opening by the fold down armrest. You might see the beginning of the zip tie start to come down before you'd ever see the hook. And you can kind of grab that and pull it down because it's a little bit skinnier and you might get past all the foam that might be in the way. So, and then of course you'd cut that zip tie back off so that you can hook the hook to it. So I like when I put it in the latch gallery, it kind of looks nice and clean and neat and easy to do. I can tell you from having done it, even knowing what I'm doing, it can still be quite a challenge and really kind of wow. But it's once you have this kind of assistance, it can be certainly doable. Thank you, Stephanie, for mentioning that the new latch manual is out. If you haven't heard yet, it's green. We're very excited about it. And there's a lot of regular latch information, tethering information in the latch manual, like the locations of where they are and how to use them. We've seen many examples in this presentation. I also like to point out that some manufacturers provide non-latch information that matters in pickup trucks, like the use of load legs in those pickup trucks on car seats, whether they're dynamic belts in the front and or rear, and then specific details on how to switch airbags on and off. So there is a little bit of additional vehicle information that's in the latch manual that is not necessarily latch, but can be really helpful in pickup trucks. And we also do have a fact sheet available for purchase on pickup trucks. I really rarely tell families what they should do in terms of what car they should buy. That's not, I'm much more often working with what they have, and that's kind of their private decision what car they want. But when it comes to people that want a pickup truck, I don't think they always recognize how much value as a family, using it for a family, they're going to get out of selecting the crew cab versus the extended cab. And I've actually certainly talked to families that have said, boy, I wish I'd known that it made a difference. I saw there were back seats. I didn't figure it mattered for kids. And of course it does. So I do try to butt in a little bit and let them know, hey, if you're going to use this for your family, you're going to want a crew cab pickup, or at least give that a good thought, and understand what you're doing when you make that purchase. Okay, so that is it for this presentation. I just want to ask Stephanie if there are any questions for the time we have remaining.
There are questions, Denise, and we just want to thank you. And a lot of comments have come in that are thanking you for an excellent presentation and making things that sometimes seem unclear, making them very easy to understand and allowing them to be clear. So thank you for that. And we will get to some questions. If I don't get to your question, or you have a specific question that you would like asked, you see here Denise's information. So please reach out to her and ask her those questions that maybe we don't get a chance to get to. So Denise, Katie is wondering, just wanting to verify that we are okay with placing a car seat on a truck front seat where the sensor for the airbag shows that it's deactivated versus having an airbag that is turned off via the key. Does this vary based on rear facing and forward facing?
Okay, so great question. I'm glad you're clarifying this, Katie, because clearly we're not the ones necessarily saying, I'm certainly not wanting to say, once I see that, you're good to go and you're allowed to do whatever, because certainly you're checking the owner's manual for every other requirement for front seat use, including the fact that for rear facing, they're going to say, don't do it. Don't put a rear facing seat, even, and honestly, and this was in my more general CPS truck situation. For this one, I was really focusing on forward facing because it was a tethering, but certainly even vehicles where the sensor turns it off, there are, if you look at the owner's manual, they're going to recommend you don't put a rear facing child in that front seat. And so first of all, we're always going to make sure that we use the back when we can. And as I said, it's just in pickup trucks, sometimes we don't have a back seat or we can't use it. And so then we have to go ahead and consider how to use the front seat. But only one of those considerations is, what is the airbag status? But we certainly want to be checking that and make sure the caregiver consistently keeps checking it throughout use. If everything else lines up and we're allowed to put the car seat there, that they're making sure that that is still turned off and that the sensor is working properly.
Great. And then Marcia is asking, do we have an estimated launch date for the new school bus curriculum?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I did mention school buses in one of these slides, didn't I? Yes. So if people who aren't familiar, I am working on with a team on the school bus curriculum that is from NHTSA, and we have drafted the first round. And as people know, we were really restricted in our ability to get a lot of things done, like piloting this past year. And so I don't have an actual date. I can tell you we are in the process, and it is with NHTSA now for some review, but we will still have to do some more work with collecting images and piloting. So it's going to take a little more time, and it will definitely help us when we're able to assemble again and do those kinds of things. So thanks for asking about that. I'm excited.
Thanks for answering that, Denise. Margot is asking that she knows that the owner's manual specifies whether the tether goes under the head restraint or over, but is it more common to go under the head restraint to reduce the slack and looseness over time?
Yeah, I would say if we were speaking in generalities, definitely your initial thought should be we're going to keep it as short as we can, go as straight as possible, and almost, you know, in many cases that means going under the head restraint. So I think that when that is possible, that is usually what we do. But you definitely do have to check the manuals, and just my observation, the manuals is frequently they don't say what to do so much as show it. So you're looking more at the images than the words, but we do try in the latch manual to actually say the words so that you actually have that directly stated as to where you want it routed. Sometimes that's in the notes for the actual model itself. Some manufacturers prefer to only give the information in the model notes for each specific model, and others have more general guidance that they provide in that bullet point that I was describing earlier for the F-150. So you want to check both places for sure, because sometimes that's going to give you some kind of more blanket permission to remove a head restraint if necessary, but it's also going to say if you have a 2-point or, you know, a straight line tether to go between the posts, but it'll also always tell you what if you have a V-shaped tether. So that is definitely not in most owner's manuals. So we like to say, well, if it's a V-shaped tether, should I go to the outsides of those 2 posts, but under the head restraint? So I think, you know, your instinct is right. You want to kind of keep as much slack out of the system as possible and make it a short path, but you do have to check the manual to be sure, and the latch manual.
Wonderful. Lewis asked, are the truck pictures that were at the beginning of your presentation, are they in the new latch manual?
So trying to think of what pictures she's talking about, but I would say, because you asked if they're in the latch manual, probably not, because we have drawings in the latch manual that are from Safe Ride News, but very few other images that are certainly none from manufacturers of vehicles. So more likely, if you're looking for pictures, that's the kind of thing we're going to put in the latch gallery. And we would just note in the notes that you can go there to find the pictures. We do have a lot of drawings of trucks in the latch manual. In chapter 5, there's 2 or 3 pages that are specific to trucks and tethering. And so there are some pictures there.
Okay.
But there are drawings.
That is great. And the new latch manual, if you haven't seen it, had your hands on it yet, it's great to have it out again, Denise. And thank you so much to you and your team for everything that you do with all of that, including the latch manual. So before we finish, Denise, are there any other words that you would like to close out with?
Yeah, the one other thing I would just say is right before this presentation, I got an email from our submit a question on the website, or you can use my email address right here, asking about a tethering situation in pickup trucks. So I was able to answer that question right before this session. And so clearly you have my ear anytime, and you have my contact information. So happy to hear from you if you have more questions or if something didn't get answered.
That's great. So if we go to the last slide, I just want to remind everyone that a survey is going to pop up right after the webinar is over. And then please check your email. It will come tomorrow afternoon. It doesn't come until the afternoon, for a confirmation email that will include the event ID, which you will enter into your CPS online profile. If you don't get it by tomorrow afternoon after 2 p.m. Eastern time, then check your spam filter. And if it's not there, just shoot me an email. I'll confirm your attendance and send you a confirmation email. So with that, again, Denise, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to all the technicians and advocates that joined us this afternoon. We really appreciate you being here. So everyone, have a great and safe day.